The primary purpose of Innovative AAC Solutions, the podcast, is to educate and inform. The views expressed during all episodes are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute educational or medical advice. They are not necessarily the views of Special School District of St. Louis County.
You guys believe it? We are more than halfway through our fall semester, and it is time for another episode of Innovative AAC Solutions. Just as a reminder, I'm Laura Hayes, and I am one of the AAC facilitators here at SSD. And we are just diving in this season to all things literacy and how they relate to AAC. So today, I thought we would have one of the amazing, wonderful AT specialists on to sit down and chat about how this intersects with all things academic, right? Because one of the things that we hear a lot from our teams is, well, how do I merge everything? How do I do it all? Because we're being asked to do so much. So today we sit down with Kim White, one of the AT specialists, and who has a very long history with SSD that you will hear about as a classroom teacher, and how so many resources that she has discovered have helped her students, especially those with emergent communication or emergent literacy learners, those students, and specifically those students, and how it's helped them, and how we can continue to kind of build those skills and just flood them with both resources and exposure and experience so that they can become autonomous communicators and readers. And that is one of our goals. So before we jump into that, I did want to continue along with our literacy jokes for the year. And so this one is that all about teachers, right? So a teacher is teaching her kindergarten class the alphabet. So the teacher says, "Now, class, can you tell me the next two letters after M?" What do you think the class might say? Class says NO. No, NO. I love a good cheeky joke. I hope you guys are enjoying these as much as I am. But definitely write them down if you are, so that you can share them with your students and they can share them with peers. They're just some really great ones. I think in my opinion, they go way above the ones that are kind of standard or programmed in the device. And they go right along with your literacy lessons. So definitely think about that. Maybe even have a joke or a literacy joke while you're doing reading throughout the week. Let's dive in, though, with Kim White, because she has so many great tidbits and gems of wisdom and just, resources that you can dive into today that we'll all put in the show notes for you guys to explore on your own. And then know that if you have questions and how this all correlates to academics and communication, just to reach out to your AT specialist or your AAC facilitator, and we can guide and support you along the way. Let's dive into our interview with Kim White. Welcome back to Innovative AAC Solutions. I'm Laura Hayes, and I am here with one of my favorite people that I get to work with on a regular basis, and that is the lovely, the wonderful, the infamous Kim White. Kim White, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. And what a nice introduction.
So, for someone who doesn't have the pleasure of getting to see you on a regular basis, can you just share with our listeners a little bit about your background as a teacher and your experience with both SSD and all related to AT and assistive tech?
Absolutely. So I felt like I was very lucky. When I was a little kid, even, I knew that I wanted to be a teacher, and I thought I was going to be like the second or third grade teacher. And fortunately, I was taking a college class, and we had to do observations in both general education classes and special education classes. And I would go to this fabulous second grade class, and the teacher, oh my goodness, she was amazing. But I kid you not, those kids knew this routine so well that I didn't even think the teacher needed to be there. Like they had it down. And I was like, wow, well, that's really impressive. But I just kind of stood around and watched these, little worker bees do their thing. And then on the opposite days, I would go to a special education classroom. And I never knew what to expect when I would walk in those doors. Some days you were eating glitter, and other days, like kids were sitting in their seats, and then you'd come back and something else exciting would be happening. And I was absolutely hooked. I loved that. I felt like I really had a purpose when I was in those classrooms, and I loved the idea that every day was different. And so that kind of stuck. So here I am 32 years later. This is my 32nd year with Special School District. For 25 of those years, I primarily worked as what we call a self-contained or center-based teacher. Um, and so I did all the direct special education instruction for those students. So again, I was never bored. I felt very fortunate though. Special School District has a lot of professional development opportunities. And one of the things that they did about, it was a little over 25 years ago, is they started training what they called assistive technology teams. And so they provided a team in a school with a whole bucket of tools. And at the time, you can imagine there weren't as many tools as there are now. But we got to have this set of tools in our classroom, and then they provided monthly trainings for us. Like, here's how you can use this. And really the focus was on, giving us information. And something just really clicked with me like, wow, this could really help improve my kids' progress, but also their independence and completing tasks. And so not too long after that, I applied and I became an assistive technology specialist for 1 year. I was so fortunate because I got to meet with all these gurus from all over the country and learn, what's happening across the country and all over the world, all these cool new trends and things that people were putting in place to really help make progress with their students. And so after getting all that experience, I decided, you know what? I'm not quite ready to give up on the classroom yet. I want to take everything I learned, and I jumped back in the classroom until about 7 years ago. And my assistive technology guru at the time decided she was moving to Oregon. And I said, you know what? I think that this is the time I want to jump back in there. And because again, it's such an evolving thing. Tools that I learned 7 years ago have been replaced by two or three things that are even more fabulous and can really help my students in other ways. And so that's brought me to where I am today.
And the theme is every day is still different.
Absolutely. I can go from rolling around on the floor with some kiddos in early childhood and making sure that they can access those creation stations and things like that to meeting with high school students. And they're like, nope, I'm not doing that. And then I'm like, okay, well, let me know, what can I help you do? What kinds of tools do you need to help you in the classroom? And then we have some kiddos that are in a vocational training program, and I can help make sure that they're successful in their jobs. So yeah, every day is still different. And like I said, I just love being able to learn new things right along with my students as well.
I want to talk about the new things, but I also am very curious. Do you remember any of these tools in this assistive technology toolbox that you had access to? What, like, were they big and heavy? I was just talking to somebody about a Liberator yesterday, so I'm curious.
Well, IntelliTools was a company and they had these big, gigantic, kind of like interactive keyboard type things. And so you could create custom, setups for the students to be able to access, like, Apple starts with A. Can you find the A? And you could have a big A and they would touch it. It would say A. And that was like so exciting. The Alpha Smart keyboards were also really big then. And so it was like, oh my goodness, to be able to just type and print things out. Was very cool and have some spelling support even with those tools. So those were kind of the big hits at the time.
So interesting. And now we think about those keyboards and we're like, oh, good gravy. They're so big. And
They're
we
like
think about all the,
dinosaurs.
yes, we think about all the options now. So when we think about your experience with AT through the years, and how assistive technology has shifted, what role do you feel like assistive technology currently plays within the IEP for someone who has, let's say, complex communication or academic needs?
So even for those students that may not even have complex bodies, it's something that should be considered at every IEP. And a lot of times I think people make that connection, that means they get a computer or that they get an AuGCOM device and that's it. And, that's really not it. Just even providing some visual supports for students, that's assistive technology. Those mounts, those books in different formats, page fluffers so that they can turn the pages of a book independently. All of those things are assistive tech and they need to be documented in the IEP. One thing that we like to note though too is that you want to describe the features that the student needs. Because again, as we talked about, those tools are constantly changing. And so you want to make sure that the next teacher or the next team that works with that student knows exactly what features they need to be successful. And again, these things provide them access to the curriculum. It's not a crutch. It's not, an easy way out for them. This is giving them that access to the curriculum, and they never take the place of instruction. And I think that's something really important to keep in mind. We want to document what those features are so that the students have that access consistently. And that can be either in the present level or in the accommodation section or both, whatever's most appropriate for that student. So we want to make sure that they can achieve that success.
Yeah, and I think the other piece to that too is that we do see some fluidity and movement with some of our students. And if they leave the district or if they go to a different district where we might call it a universal support or something that we think, oh, well, just every student has access to it. But if they need it to be successful for their individual education plan, then we want to make sure we document that, right? Because otherwise, if they leave, if they go somewhere where that's not a universal support, then likely we would see, or we would expect to see, some regression of those skills or a lack of access to the academic supports they need.
Absolutely.
Fair to say. Yeah. Okay. So when we think about literacy related to, because this whole season is going to be on literacy, which I know is a topic near and dear to your heart, Kim.
Absolutely.
And so we thought we could unpack it together and talk a little bit about what are universal literacy and written expression supports in the world of AT?
So I teach a class called Literacy for Complex Learners. And so that has really allowed us to dive in on the work of Dr. Karen Erickson and Dr. David Copenhaver. They have taken the 4 blocks model, which honestly has been around forever, used in a lot of general education settings. And they've kind of adapted that and said, okay, let's look at these pieces. So the 4 blocks are mainly like the guided or shared reading, independent reading time, group or predictable chart writing, and then independent writing time, as well as some work with letters and sounds and phonics and all that good stuff. So they kind of take those pieces and then they really look to see, okay, how can we apply that to our learners? And it's important that they get that exposure to all of those things. And I'm sure people are like, independent writing, when you look at some of those kiddos with those complex bodies, that's usually a piece that's omitted, or the independent reading time. And they're saying, hey, you know what? They need to have access to all of these components. So guided reading, I think people are very familiar with that term. Typically, a teacher reads a book or students take turn reading a page or a paragraph. And then you go through and you answer those WH questions and you make your inferences and you do your main ideas. And, yay, we did guided reading. We want to kind of look at that a little bit differently and do something called shared reading. And so this is more about an interaction with you and the student. It's not about getting the book done. It's about really focusing on that communication. And you're spending a lot of time actually just observing the student and their reactions to maybe the words or the pictures that you're pointing out on the page. So like I said, you can be looking at this book and you want to make sure it's a book that's going to be of interest to them. That's really important too. A lot of times we're like, oh, this student is level A. So we bring out those level A books. You know what? Those level A books aren't always so exciting. And they have a lot of really basic sight words. So finding something that may be, a little bit higher level, but we can interact with that student when we see their eyes light up, or they start, wiggling in their seat, or they're hopping up and down, or even their arms are moving around. We're like, oh, hey, we've got some attention here. And that's what we want. We want them to get the idea that, hey, those words on the page mean something, and those pictures are helping to tell that story. And so we want to really work on that interaction. And so I might point at a picture and say, oh, do you like to go to the beach? And if their eyes wide up, oh my goodness, wait for them to give a response, or show some kind of reaction. That wait time is really hard, but it's really important because we want to give them an opportunity to be part of that experience. And that's really what it is. It's more of an experience instead of a get her done mentality of read this book and answer some questions. So we really want to work on that engagement and communication within reading that story. Even focusing on some key word, if you're working on a letter of the day, oh my goodness, look at this. Here's a picture of a word, a picture of something that starts with that letter. And again, it doesn't have to be the main idea of the book that you're focusing on, but you want their interest, and we want them interacting. Karen Erickson actually has several websites. One is just kind of giving you ideas of how to implement shared reading, and some great, kind of almost like a checklist for teachers too. Like here's a way to kind of, do a little self-evaluation and making sure that you're giving them that wait time. Here are some ways that we can work on that interaction. And then she also has another website that provides books that have questions, some prompts already set for you that you can access. And it also has symbolated text that can go along with that if your students use specific communication systems. So lots of resources.
Let's unpack symbolated text for just a second, because
yes.
I want to make sure we don't jump over that, because it's something that I know has been a little bit of a hot topic in our field. So can you speak a little bit about symbolated text and the do's and don'ts, like the short version of the do's and don'ts of symbolated text and why it's important?
Absolutely. So Dr. Caroline Musselwhite has a great video out there that I actually play in our class, kind of discussing that. We want to make sure that we're not symbolating every word that we're presenting to students, especially when we're working on that instructional piece. If we're exposing them to letters and sounds, we want to make sure that we're not symbolating all that text. We want them to work on, okay, we need to sound out that word. Otherwise, we're making them do twice the work. First, they have to figure out what the picture is, and then they have to figure out, oh, wait, what sound does that make? How do I put those sounds together? And so, like I said, twice the work there. We want to make sure that we're just focusing on that text because that's the important part, or the letters and sounds. When we're doing something like comprehension, or we're introducing some new fringe vocabulary, maybe from, a love be from some kind of instructional topic that you guys are working on, some content in social studies or science, then you want to maybe symbolate those words so that they have an understanding. Oh, yeah, that's what that means. That's what she's talking about. Then that's okay to symbolate that text. When the focus is, comprehension, yay. When it's not, we're working on those letters and sounds. We want to take those symbols away and make sure the student is part of that.
Yeah, exactly. And so like part of that goes against the science of reading, right? You have to be able to encode those sounds and map them. And that's the science of reading that is so important when it comes to phonics and blending of those sounds and learning what those orthographic symbols mean together. And when we add that symbol, like you said, Kim, it just adds another layer of complexity. It adds one more thing that's a distractor and likely that they're going to get context from, and not one more deterrent to not build that map of what the letters mean together. The other thing that I heard you kind of mention is with the comprehension piece. Sometimes it can be also really helpful if they have an AAC system to have some of that symbolization there to talk or comment or ask a question about the book, and they know exactly where that is within their AAC system. So that can sometimes be another reason why we would use that support, but we're not necessarily taking the text word for word is what I'm hearing you say, right? Like we're not encouraging every word of brown bear to be symbolated so that they have access to all of those symbols.
Absolutely. And making sure too, if you are going to symbolate for those comprehension tasks, you want to make sure you're using the same symbol set that is on their communication device. So again, they're not having to work so hard to figure out exactly what they want to say.
Yeah. So any other websites you mentioned Karen's and for someone who's not familiar with her websites, what we could put them in the show notes, but can you just list them very quickly?
Um, I will actually have to send those to you if that's all
Perfect.
right.
Yep, no problem.
I
No
will
problem.
make
But
sure those are available.
are there some other ones too that we might look to for supports or if someone's like, "Oh my gosh, yes, like I want more."
So yes, like I said, the work of Karen Erickson and Dr. David Copenhaver also have a book called Comprehensive Literacy. And so all of their strategies are listed in that book. And then there's lots of materials available. I have also provided a link to our workshop, which has our presentations, but then all of the links for resources and different programs that people can use. So those shared reading, some ideas for shared reading books are there. And then also, too, we want to talk about that flip side of having that independent reading. And technology has come a long way with that. Even the libraries now are great in providing books in a digital format or books that kids can listen to. There are lots of websites that offer books now in an audio format, like Epic is something I know that's used in a lot of gen ed classrooms. And again, our students can pick books that are of interest to them and listen to those at their level. Storyline Online is great. It has actors reading the books to the kids. So there are great voices, there's great expression, and it really engages the students. Another one I love is Storybooks from Space. So the astronauts on the space station read books to the kids. Their hair is standing up and they're talking about, and some days, they say, oh, we're a little busy today up here at our space station. And so again, it's very personable. If kids are interested in space, that would be an awesome website to go to. Or the other option too is for teachers to make books that we know will cover things that are interesting for the students. I did it. A teacher had me come in to kind of evaluate using the Every Move Counts assessment, which is just kind of looking to see what's motivating, when you present some sensory information to the student. Again, you're observing the student. And I came in and the teacher's like, oh gosh, we're not really getting a big reaction. And all of a sudden it clicked with me that every time a little friend walked around the room, this student was watching everything that friend did. And I'm like, oh, there we go. There's our book. We wrote a book about the little friend that she liked to watch and interact with in the classroom. And so that's holy cow, talk about buy-in. Sure, I want to read a book about my best friend. That would be great. And so teachers can use programs like Clicker, Boardmaker, Tar Heel Reader. Pictello is an app they can use, or Slides or PowerPoint to create books just for that student of something that they have interest in. In our class, someone created a book about trains, and they actually went to the train station here near one of their schools and took photos of trains and had pictures of trains going by. That was something that was very motivating for that student. And oh my goodness, the vocabulary that they were able to generate and interact, and the opportunity for interaction on that book was incredible. So making sure that they have that independent reading time as well for something that they are very interested in.
Yeah, and I love the multisensory component of that you're talking about too, whether it be listening to the book from a famous actor or even adding an interactive piece like in Slides where you're adding the train sound, for example, like whatever it is to kind of pull the hook, make them more engaged, make there be more of a connection for them. I love all of those ideas.
Well, just thinking of my typical high school student, I mean, he's listening to music while he's watching a video, while he's talking to his friends. And so these kiddos are used to getting input in lots of different ways. And so, just a plain book with computerized speech sometimes, isn't just going to grab their attention. And so we need to make sure that we've got them engaged and it's something that they want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And so, okay, so we talked about shared reading, independent reading. What about, I think, the next block would be writing.
Yes. So we think, teachers a lot of times will do instruction on here's the skill that we're focusing on. You have a subject, you have a verb. We're going to focus more on what something called predictable chart writing. And so it's an interactive way for the students to all work together. They can make the sentence. They might have, each of them stand in a line and they each have one word that they're holding up to help make the sentence. And a sentence has a beginning and a capital letter. And oh, what do we need at the end? And everybody yells a period, or a question mark or whatever it is. So really interacting with that text, again, is what's really important. And then also too, maybe we'll have a topic. Oh gosh, summer sounds really good to me right now. So maybe we're going to write a chart about what we're going to do over the summer. And again, this might be something where you just add one sentence each day. And then throughout the week, every student gets an opportunity to say, oh, what they're going to do over the summer. You can put those together then, and you have a classroom book that they can read during their independent time to find out what everybody's going to be doing over the summer. And again, this is very individualized. Maybe somebody is pulling something out of a hat, an object to show what they want to do over the summer. Another student may use their communication device to give us 2 words to say what they're going to do. And maybe another student in the class is going to give us, a whole complex sentence. All of those responses are okay. Again, we want to put all those ideas together. And again, it's an opportunity for the students to interact and really see how what we say or what we, put on paper has meaning and has purpose.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know if we have a whole episode from Kelly Fonner on alternative pencils and what that can look like. And she does talk a little bit about predictable chart rating. And so if anybody wants to unpack that more, you can feel free to go back to that episode, or you could also go to project-core.com. They have some great modules on it that really break it down into how you can make it very routine based, like Kim is saying. It's one of our favorites, I think, because there's so much predictability and flexibility with that support specifically.
Right. Dr. Gretchen Hanser actually does a lot of great work with alternative pencils as well. And so we just want to make sure those kiddos have access to all 26 letters of the alphabet. And so to work on that independent writing piece, I always think of, when my son was little, any little thing that he scribbled on a piece of paper was like golden. And you hung it on the refrigerator and you were so proud because look at that, my child scribbled on a piece of paper. And how many times do we give our students with complex bodies that opportunity? And, or if they scribble, we're like, oh, or a para will sit and write something for them. They need that opportunity to interact with, whether it's paper or on a computer or their comm device. They need that opportunity to be able to get their own ideas down in any way that they can. So programs like Clicker Writer, Boardmaker, Explain Everything, PixWriter, dictation works really well now too with Siri and in Google. So lots of different ways to do that. But Dr. Gretchen Hanser comes from the International Academy of Hope up in New York, and she has a lot of great ideas as far as ways that we can work on finding alternative pencils. And it may just be, a flip book of ABC letters, and a teacher scans those options for them. Do you want A, B, C, D, E? Wait to see if the student responds. They don't give a response. Okay, how about F, G, H, I, J? They can say their letters. So if we're practicing writing somebody's name, you can ask them, go through that partner assisted scanning, and they choose their letters. You honor whatever letter they choose and you write those down. When they're finished and they say they're finished writing their name, then you're going to go back and say, oh, this is how you spelled your name. And you can repeat that. And then you're going to show them, this is how I would spell your name. Oh, look, you got the B. You got, whatever letter you want to point out. Wow, great job doing that. We're not going to make them then go back and do it again. For the next time, though, we're going to honor that same system and give them that opportunity to get their ideas down on paper. So that's something really important.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to that implicit and explicit instruction, right, that we talk about with both reading and writing, right? We need both for them to see the value and the importance of it. We don't want to limit them. Like you said, we have to have access to all 26 letters, but it's not like we're waiting for them to be able to identify those before we move on and show them the value of writing, because it goes hand in hand. There's developmental writing scales of how it changes from drawings to more symbolic writing. And so they need to see the value of like my written expression means something, right? Like you're saying, like there's all these ways we can do it, whether it be through partner assisted scanning, whether it be through magnetic letters, sensory exploration with letters, like whatever it is, we can really tie that into showing them. I know we've talked about writer's corner, and just ways that we can show them implicitly through that instruction that there's value to. So don't sleep on it and wait for them to have, all 26 letters of the alphabet before we can say, oh, they can read, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That word work portion is also very important, giving them that opportunity, like you were saying, to interact with those letters. And Dr. Hans are also, this was kind of like an eye-opening thing for me because I used to do like letter of the week. I was the one when there was an H, was our letter of the week, a helicopter would land on our field. Like I was all in for letter of the week. And then all of a sudden she said something at a workshop and she's like, well, if you do a letter of the week, it takes you until about February or March to get through the whole alphabet. And I was like, holy cow. So if your name is Zachary, man, your letter isn't, you're not even going to get talked about until, February or March. So she really emphasizes the need to do a letter of the day and kind of run through those. Obviously, you're going to get a lot more opportunities and exposure to all the letters that way, but first focus on the ones that are personally meaningful. Like, the student's name starts with a specific letter, or if they really like those trains, man, T better be something pretty close to the beginning to be able to, focus on that interest as well. Then maybe you go back and talk about ABC order, and then really focus on the letter names and the letter sounds. And then frequency of use. What words are we using a lot of the time? There are not a lot of words that start with Q typically or X. So maybe leave those, towards the end and then maybe look for some similarities, those B's and D's and P's and Q's. That could be your next time around. So again, giving them a lot more opportunities to interact. The University of Florida Literacy Institute also has some excellent resources online. They did an amazing hub for online learning when we were all shut down during COVID. They've kept those resources, but then they keep increasing. They've started a new or just completed a foundation's literacy program, but they've provided all the resources online for free. And they also have a dyslexia website for parents as well. So lots of great opportunities to interact and really work on those sounds, and great hands-on opportunities too, which I think are really important for a lot of our students.
And free, which we love free. We love free and
Free is
accessible.
beautiful. Free research-based materials. It doesn't get much better than that.
Exactly. So we'll be sure to put those in the notes too. But I'm curious, Kim, do you feel like we're still seeing challenges in supporting AT in the classroom and maybe even specific to literacy, or what do you wish we could change about that? Anything?
Yeah, I was a little sad. I had a teacher, and this is someone that I've worked with for a long time, and she made a comment in one of the trainings. She's like, well, I really don't need to focus on literacy for this specific student. And the student is in a power wheelchair. She's doing very well, making a lot of progress. She's like, oh, but when she gets to the high school, she's going to work the beverage cart. So we don't need to focus on those ABCs or those letters or those sounds. And my little teacher heart just kind of broke at that point because as Karen Erickson says, there is nothing more functional than being able to read and write. And again, just giving them that access. I have a student right now that, when you see all the equipment and you see, we worked really hard to find some switch points for this other student. And now the student is able to search on her TV to find the TV show that she wants because she's had access to the alphabet. She can spell things now. So presuming that positive intent, that is a great, great thing that I wish everyone could just, instead of just looking at what's right in front of you, what you're seeing, all the equipment, all the scary things, but just presuming like, hey, this is what we're going to do. And it's amazing the progress that you will see when you have that mindset.
Yes, 100%. Because when we think about, I always tell teachers, when we think about how many times we use autonomous communication throughout the day, right? Like, are you talking about the latest Netflix show? Are you talking about the Gen Z slang that you don't understand, like slay queen or bruh or like whatever it is, right? We don't have that in a lot of our communication systems, even talking about their new baby brother, like trying to what's their new baby brother's name? And I know teachers don't have time to customize devices, right? So if we can build the capacity to teach them how to autonomously communicate through literacy and through their keyboards, we are we are really giving them the gift of autonomous communication, of being able to say whatever they need to say, and thinking about how we do that as adults. There are so many times that if we had a robust device that we all knew how to use, we would have a communication breakdown if we didn't have access to the keyboard. And I always go
Right.
back to that. We have to instill that in our kids. Okay, so we could, I mean, this is why we're doing the entire season on literacy, Kim. So, because we could talk about it all day and all the resources that we want everyone to have access to. But we'll have to leave those in the notes because we kind of need to land the plane. Before we do, I wanted to ask you what I ask everyone who comes on, which is just what is your favorite AAC or AT moment to date? Do you have one that you can share with us?
I don't know that I have one specific incident. I think part of what I have loved about my job, is that I've been able to I have four of our partner school districts in St. Louis County, that I've been working with pretty much the whole 7 years that I've been here. And so for a lot of the students that I've worked with, I'm kind of one of the constants, that they see that, they may change teachers, they may move schools, elementary to middle school to high school, but I'm still there. And so to be able to know some of those students, know where they started, and see how much more independent that they have become, and the fact that they're advocating for what they need, as they progress through those schools and the years that I've been working with them. And so I can't even say it's one specific student. I can just say, for those kiddos that I have, been on that journey with them, it's just so rewarding to be able to see them take off and become such independent advocates for themselves. One of my students that we actually highlighted, special school district is very good about pointing out great things that are happening. And so a few years ago, they highlighted our department. And I chose one student, that I work with as kind of our feature student. Like, holy cow, this kid's got it. He was actually teaching the teachers how to use his tools. Teachers, if they had questions, would come to him. And so I'm like, wow, what a shining star. Well, now he is in high school doing very, very well. And he just earned, a Rosemary Zander Award, for our school district. And, a part of me was just like, to see him shine and be recognized for becoming such a responsible, um, and great individual, and so, and doing such a good job in his school environment independently has just made me so happy.
Oh,
So I think that overall progress, that I see is what keeps me going.
yeah, what a great gem to end on. I love it. And I think that if anything, everyone should take your guys' class, your workshop class. It's a 2-day class now or a 3-day class?
It's a 2-day
2-day
class,
class.
so there's a lot crammed in there, but we want people to have the resources. And yeah, we would love to have, everyone, especially when you're struggling, because a lot of times there aren't materials that fit our students. There are a lot of programs out there, but they may not be appropriate for, the students that you're working with. And so this kind of gives you a framework like, hey, here's what we can do. Let's make life easier. Share those resources, and not have to spend as much time looking for things, and you can just focus on your instruction with those students.
Absolutely. Could have said it better myself. So definitely look for that. We'll put the workshop in the notes below. If you can't wait for the workshop, we'll send the other resources, including Project Core, which has those self-paced modules, which you could do and or give to your other staff who may be interested or trying to learn and may not necessarily have that time to get out of the classroom and do an entire 2-day workshop. So no, we'll have lots of different resources for whatever type of learning you need. And then Kim, if people still have questions, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Just shoot me an email. My email is kwhite@ssdmo.org. I respond almost always within 24 hours. So yeah, and that's what I love to do. I love being able to help and support people. I've made materials, to support those teachers so that they can, focus their time. So if there are specific topics, a lot of the things I've created too are available in our lending library. So if, you belong to SSD, you're welcome to come check out any of those materials. And I try whatever I try to make available so everyone else can kind of share and, not have to spend the time creating, and just focus on learning.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. That's what we want. That is our focus. And I will just put one more little plug in. So, you guys are the other half to us. I always tell people like you're our other half, and we both fall under the umbrella of AT. We've got AAC on one side, and then we've got computer access and assistive technology right here on the other side. And so we have two different websites. So I would always encourage people to go to your website and our website if you have more questions or want more resources on any of these topics, because we have tons of links, tons of videos, tons of trainings there too. So be sure to check that out.
Absolutely.
Well, we just want to thank Kim for coming on today. It has been such a pleasure. I know that there's so many gems and more to unpack from everything you've shared. So, on behalf of Innovative AAC Solutions, we just want to thank Kim, and everybody make sure to check out those resources.
Thank you.